We do have a bunch of questions lined up. Okay, let's start with this question on finding talent for niche positions, which is really, really challenging. And you often have only a given restrictive time period to hire. So, any tips on how we can find talent for such niche positions in a short time?
I think there's a lot of people have when they put in that amount to research. Earlier, people had to put in that amount to research, figure out what are the skills which are associated with it, the right keywords, the right amount of associated or adjacent skills which are needed to succeed at the job. And that time frame was a long, right? Especially for niche skills, you have new industries, you have new skill sets coming in at a span which is unprecedented in history, right? So one, a lot of context which is getting built by AI, and that is also getting updated every day. So if you're using generative AI, until unless you're not giving in something which is proprietary to your organization, I think that's helping. The second is a lot of times organizations similar to yours are also facing. So you can have conversation with the leadership who is hiring for that, and if you had that context earlier before while doing your research, I think that will also give you a perspective. And the third thing is probably it's a very tricky time to be in, but staying aligned to what are the focus areas for your company, and every company will have their own niche thing that they're focusing on as well. For us here, it is about talent. So us staying on top of what the trends there are and knowing and anticipating kind of needs in advance, I think that will be helpful.
There's also a question which is a little tech specific. The question says, how does the application funnel look like for fulfillment for a 2 to 3 year software engineer, like years of experience, 2 to 3 years of experience software engineer role?
Got it. What we have seen is this depends across two things. One is the scale and the size of the organization. The second is the nature of the organization, whether it's, say, probably IT organization or a product centric role. And third is how much known the organization is, right? For organizations which are more known, for organizations which their organizations, through this combination of these three things, they have a whole lot of applicants coming in at the top of the funnel, which is at the sourcing stage. So you might have 200, 300 applicants which might be coming in at this stage. Whereas for organizations which are new, which are hiring for technologies which might be niche, or which are in the early stage of their journey, they might have probably people coming in around 20 to 30 applicants, which might be at the top of the funnel. Then you do the screening. So anywhere between 10 to 30% of the profiles usually get screened further. And then you have your 2 to 3 panel rounds in which you can see a conversion rate of 50%. And then ultimately you'll have probably 5% ending up at the final stage.
I hope that answered your question, Junaid. Then there's a question on using generative AI and whether there's a way to use Gen AI for source matching of profiles from portals like Naukri based on job descriptions.
Great question. I think till now we have relied on keyword searching. We had relied on Boolean searches, a whole bunch of technology which was based on the previous form of AI, which is traditional AI, right? And that is where, even if you would have mentioned ABC as a keyword, your resume would get picked up rather than having a context to it. Now, what these LLMs are doing, or probably the new technology is doing, is that it is helping us read a whole bunch of information and decode it in terms of the context in which those skills are applied as well. I named one such tool, which is TechSure, not Cure, but probably it's in West. And such tools are getting built every day, where resume passes are improving. And I think it'll soon become more commonplace as well, where rather than just doing keyword searches, you are looking in terms of what is the context of the experience of the profile, and then those searches happening. I think we ourselves are doing POCs, something around that, where You also are able to evaluate sub competencies. For example, hiring for a software engineer, how do you evaluate them on certain technical competencies? If you want to assess them on certain kind of context they have worked in, for example, you're hiring for an experienced developer and you look them to have some kind of team leadership profile they have worked on in before, capacity they have worked on in before. Are you even able to add those sub competencies and sub nuances? I think that will come with a lot of generative AI applications. So a lot of, I think, coming back to what was asked, matching JD to resume, that will become a lot more nuanced as we apply this.
Then there's a question on examples of how AI can create biases. You did kind of answer that in detail during our discussion and when you were talking about the challenges, but let's have a couple of detailed examples of how bias can be created when AI is involved.
There is I think this is the most spoken about example, which is also being rectified by the organization, which face this, the challenge of bias coming in because of AI. So back in the day, I think, which was ahead of its time, Amazon launched its own platform, which was helping in terms of screening people. You would have resumes coming in. It trained it on the data that they had. And they used it to basically screen people, filter people who were coming in their hiring funnel. They ultimately realized and pulled back their model because they realized that it was fed on their internal data. And that data was leading to biases in terms of certain set of people getting prioritized over others. There were similar issues which were faced by some other organizations as well. This was the nascent state of AI which was getting implemented, right? So I think biases in AI, they come in because they come in where the models are trained on historical data. Companies need to be very cautious that if they are using their own limited data set to train, they need to be monitoring in terms of what output. I think both, which is good data and bad data, which is what is going in, and the output it is presenting, which is monitoring in terms of what the outcomes are coming from the use of AI. I think a lot of companies are now very, very cautious about monitoring the algorithms as well and checking in whether they are not getting building in biases as well. So that is where continuous monitoring, again, in terms of algorithm, is also very essential.
We have something which I think is kind of related in terms of just hesitation or challenges when it comes to AI. And the question basically is, how can we deal with the situation where people use AI to make ATS-friendly resumes and they get through? Or, is ATS reliable, or is screening people on the basis of keywords, is it even reliable? How do we deal with something like that?
I think, again, we have got access to technology in our personal capacity, which is helping us craft JDs and resumes which are filled with all these keywords. I mean, we all know this. It's open out there, right? Everyone knows how to create this super personalized, super job-oriented resumes where you can identify what are the skills that are required. But probably at this point in time, ATSs have not yet elevated to all ATSs have not elevated to the technology where they have gone beyond keyword matching. So that definitely might not should not be the blanket approach in terms of identifying resumes which are right fit. It can work other way around where you are screening out resumes which are not a fit at all, which is basically you lower the bar. And then I know there's already a lot of heavy lifting that recruiters, TA folks do. But probably if you don't want to miss out on hidden gems and have the right people moving onto your funnel, what you can do is, along with resume screening, you can have a layer where you're evaluating their skills right at the top of the funnel. So you have their resume and then objective map of what their skills are, which is a hard evidence of or a proof of all the skills and competencies that are required for the role. There's a hard proof beyond resume as well. We have seen a lot of organizations moving to this approach to help sort their funnel better.
Yeah, I hope that answered your question. And I think this question that's come up is really interesting, where someone is asked, how should a buyer of HR tech think like in the short term? Because there are so many tools with AI features coming up, and how do you navigate this scenario? Basically, how do you now screen for AI tools?
Very, very interesting question. I think it's a huge it's a very challenging time for HR tech buyers out there, because every company is saying, I have this AI feature coming in my tool, right? um, few pointers that come at the top of my mind. One is, companies are great at doing product marketing, right? So how do you differentiate between the product marketing, which is actually noise, versus the company actually coming up with something new for the first time? So all of us have to cultivate that discretion, and that discretion, I have seen personally the clients getting out of proof of concept. So they do trials, um, they actually use the product, they understand its impact. And Steve Jobs said it, right? um, I mean, you should not have new technology just for the sake of it, until the point it's increasingly solving the pain point of the customer. It's 10x better than what there was last. That is actually the solution. So my first advice, or my first humble suggestion would be basically to do proof of concept and then believe in what's being projected. The second is basically deciding on, not to let AI take the decision, but use AI to make recommendations for whatever tool you are using it for, across whatever tool, because you still don't know whether it's sound enough or not. The recommendations which are coming in, test it for some amount of time, and then believe, uh, believe the recommendations which are coming out of it. The third is, and this is, I think this is something which I've seen the early adopters of good technology, the HR and TA leaders doing it, is they understand the vendor roadmap of the top companies which are implementing AI deeply into their tool. So they understand that roadmap, they understand what are the changes which are coming in landscape, and they stay on top of the curve, so that they don't have a lot of things to catch up on. When everyone will have AI, everything will be AI embedded, then you need to know basically how the landscape is moving. uh, One more thing, probably, you're investing in automation, but know why you're automating it for. Probably 60-70% HR leaders report that they want to invest in automation. Probably half of them are clear on why they need that automation. So whenever you're going for a tool, have a lot of clarity on why do you need it for, and what can you expect out of it. And I think all of this will probably help you in making better decisions.
Great. Now there are a bunch of questions on tools. I think people are really interested to know what tool can do what. So I'm just going to start with one, and I've clubbed them all together. Can you advise on a tool where we can find job role definitions for job titles, which can be used for compensation benchmarking?
Job role titles for?
A tool where we can find job role definitions for job titles, which can be then used for compensation benchmarking. So basically just creating JDs, and which can help us figure out how benchmarking can be done for that.
I think Texture does this. It is TEXTIO. I don't know whether it's there in India or not, but they help in creating. They can analyze actually language patterns. They can improve job descriptions, social posts, emails, etc. I am yet to. I'm not a personal user, but this comes out of our research of the landscape. So they are one.
Then a tool that can address the big concern of offer dropouts. Anything out there?
I think a lot of engagement tools are being used over there, which is either you're getting in passive candidates warming up using Fetcher, etc., or you're using um, faster turnaround times when you're speaking to candidates. For example, Berrybot or Lena AI. So a lot of candidate engagement tools, probably in terms of reducing the TAT when there is a query coming in from candidate or passing on the feedback. People have shared some success. I have read at least success stories around them.
And a tool that can screen CVs once we input the required skills. So some kind of skill-based screening of a bunch of resumes.
I think Fetcher has that feature. They use NLP. I think we were speaking about that earlier. Basically, they use NLP to understand the job description, and have candidates match the candidate resume for that. So probably that.
Can you spell it?
FETCHER.
Fetcher. Yeah. All right, then there's a question on whether there is any AI tool with which resumes can be stored in a folder and later profiles can be searched using searches like Boolean or simple keywords. So basically some kind of a storage and searching facility.
I don't know of a tool that allows you to store, but I think it was Phenom or Eightfold, which was allowing, I think it was Eightfold, that was allowing you to tap into the entire set of applicant pool, which was there with companies earlier. And rather than just the candidates which are applying now, and then you can basically match versus all of that. And it had some form of adjacencies, they call it, which they build, which is basically if you have certain set of skills, then you would also have these skills. So they have some kind of predictive kind of algorithm for that, and from that it helps in terms of matching candidates better.
Great. But then there is a question on how can we leverage AI for distribution? So basically, if there is a JD for an open position, you typically post it on LinkedIn and maybe a few other channels, which would be kind of manual. So how can this process be made smoother and automated using AI?
I think I'm missing, I think, the name of the tool, but probably it was Entello. But Entello actually picks up information about candidates rather than posting it on multiple forums. I think I am missing on the name. I'll probably add it to the list that I'm sharing it after this webinar.
Yeah, there's also a resource that is being shared in the link for everyone, which is about tools, a curated list of tools around recruitment that you can use. You can have a look at that as well to see if something fits what you're looking for. Then there is a question that says there are 16-hour hiring biases, like confirmation biases. Like confirmation bias is one of them. Is there any way to use AI to go around it?
Got it. I think biases and AI has been one very pertinent or a common discussion point, right? Two things around that. I think one is moving to skill-based hiring, which is having objective markers around what you want to hire for, not having softer aspects around that. Usually, when you're hiring and you want to remove biases, triangulation happens across three aspects. The first one is skill matching in your resume. The second one is having a skill assessment or any kind of assessment which gives objective marker. And the third one is interviews and having standardized mechanism of evaluation across candidates when you're doing that. It is also a form of evaluation only, basically assessment, which is objective way of doing it. And then in the interview, having a standardized mechanism of evaluation. We spoke about the issue where JDs and resumes are becoming templatized because of whatever we spoke about. So if you want to move the two out of the resume out of the spectrum, still the other two, I think they can solve the purpose.
Okay, so there's a question. There are two larger questions, so we'll take them in a bit. There's a more specific question, which is about fintech. And it says, the author says, I've done some hiring in India for a fintech a few years ago, and I found it incredibly hard to work with agencies there because I found that they struggle to understand the softer or behavioral aspects of the role, which was really important for us. So again, do you see AI supporting with this in the near future?
I think the whole bunch of how we screen people is changing altogether.
Yeah.
I totally relate to what you said, which is about not being able to actually measure the role relevant competencies. For example, a lot of cognition, the proxy at this point in time is 2 + 2 = 4, which probably none of us apply. It works similarly for communication. It's reading comprehension, right? If you can read a paragraph and take a few MCQs, that's taken the proxy, and which is where probably someone who asked the question also was facing a challenge. It is not about how you dynamically express your knowledge or understanding about solving something using communication skill, which can be a spoken skill, written skill, and that is not democratized. That is not being used when you're screening talent. I think whole lot of that in terms of fintech, in terms of BFSI hiring, in terms of frontline field force hiring, in terms of any role which is consumer first hiring, that is getting solved at screening less. we are doing this at Unbury, where we have built in mechanisms that can help you solve for these softer aspects. And this is where I think the entire screening landscape is changing. You are not increasingly you are not going to see measurement of proxies when you're screening in people, but you will see actual measurement of or actual evaluation of the softer skills which are needed at work.
Then there's a question on how to deal with cultural fit when you're hiring for global roles. I think this is like a larger open question, so you can take it as you like.
Right. I think hiring for a cultural fit in every organization, one has their own values, and second, the definition of those values also. I mean, for example, we're working with this client and they want to measure for a value called win or learn. Right now, this for you or me might not have any context, but organizations need, and we do a lot of these journeys with organizations where once they define what their culture is in terms of what their values are, then they have to go down to define how to demonstrate and how not to demonstrate those values. And then if you want to effectively measure those values, you also have to go down to the level of breaking it down for every role and function you're hiring for, and then having markers through which people demonstrate that, right? For example, technical proficiency might be very different when you're hiring a frontline people versus when you're hiring head for your engineering or for your data science, right? What are the markers for, and this, when this is done, then whether you use it for your internal team in terms of their evaluation, helping them with resources around L&D, or if you're using for hiring, it gives you a much more solidified objective base to build on top of.
That is, I think, all the questions that we had. I think these were great questions, and I think these were really helpful answers, Vini. Thanks so much. Something that I caught on while you were talking was also about Unbury, and I have been reading about Unbury. It'll be great for you to just, can you tell us a little bit about Unbury and what exactly it does? I think it might be helpful to our viewers as well.
Got it. So at Unbury, what we do is basically we help HRs decode and evaluate the competencies and skills which are needed to be successful for a role in an organization, right? And then once you have decoded that, you automate the evaluation process using a configurable technology. There is no one size fit all approach when it comes to that, because the roles are evolving, the organizations are evolving. So that single cut approach does not make through. The second is you also need to measure a lot of what actual skills are rather than proxy, something that I spoke about before.